If you've ever considered getting into real estate investing, these are going to be the top 5 most popular ways to get started. What's up, guys? My name is McKeown. I'm a licensed real estate agent and investor in the Dallas-Fort Worth area of Texas. I started about 6 or 7 years ago and have accumulated well over $5 million in real estate. All of that is owned by me and myself only. So today I'm going to be walking you through various different ways that you can get started in real estate investing, or maybe you're already in the process of investing in real estate and you kind of want to take a different direction. These are really going to be the 5 that I would lean towards. So first things first, I'm going to start with a few that I'm not entirely fond of. First and foremost, number 1 is wholesaling. Now, if you're not familiar with what wholesaling is, or maybe you're a wholesaler yourself, I'm not a huge fan of starting here, but because it is an option that doesn't really require any funds, or at least sometimes it doesn't, wholesaling can be a great opportunity to kind of get your foot in the door. Now, what is wholesaling? Well, first and foremost, I would say it's probably the most unethical route of real estate investing. To put it in layman's terms, you're essentially finding desperate sellers or individuals that are in dire situations, giving them pennies on the dollar for the house that probably is worth more, but they don't have the funds to remodel it. They don't have the funds or even the time to get it sold on the open market. So instead, you kind of eliminate an issue that they're dealing with by taking it off their hands sooner rather than later. And then you assign it, or you essentially give the contract to what we call an end buyer, someone that's actually going to close on the property, someone that's actually going to be the individual that winds up either flipping it, holding it, doing whatever they may do in the future. But you truly are a middleman to the end buyer. Your goal is to essentially make the contact with the seller and then have enough connections to find that end buyer who is the actual buyer that has the cash or the finances to close on it. Now, the reason I'm not fond of this, and some people may feel attacked when I say I don't entirely love wholesalers, is again, you're taking advantage for the most part. You know, some sellers will be more than ecstatic to be able to sell their house at, below market value just because of the overall condition and shape that it's in. But for the most part, I would say 90 to 95% of the time, you're going to be getting the most money for the sale of your house if you hire a realtor and actually put it on the open market. But again, it's not every single case, and every case is different, which is why wholesalers exist. But wholesalers obviously have a purpose in our market, and I know plenty of successful wholesalers, but again, not necessarily my favorite direction. Now, the second way that you can get involved, probably for not a lot of money, this will actually technically take a little bit of money, is Airbnb Arbitrage. And if you've heard of it, it's kind of a newer way to get involved in real estate. And I would say it's actually a little bit more dangerous now than it was in 2019 or 2020, where Airbnb was doing far better than it's doing now. But Airbnb Arbitrage is essentially you're going to a landlord saying, hey, market rent for this house is $2,000. I'll give you $2,500 every single month for the next 12 months. So now you as a tenant have now locked up this place for $500 above market, so the landlord is happy, but you also have to disclose to the landlord, and to be honest with you, not everyone actually does that. Not everyone actually lets the landlord know that they're going to furnish it and turn it around and Airbnb it. But if you do find a landlord that is comfortable with this, the landlord is happy because they don't have to furnish the unit and they're getting above market rent. And you, on the other hand, you don't have to obtain financing, get a massive down payment, then also have money saved to be able to furnish the unit. And then when all is said and done, be out a substantial amount of money before even any income starts being generated. Now, again, this is something that I have not done, just like wholesaling. I've personally never done that myself either. But Airbnb Arbitrage is a great way to get your foot in the door if you know what you're doing, if you're smart. You could easily get in over your head if you wind up leasing a place. And let's say a landlord finds out that you're actually Airbnb-ing his house. He can kick you out and force you to continue to pay rent, or he can just fine you left and right for not following the lease. And then it gets really, really muddy. But this is a good option if you want to get in the door with not a lot of money down. All you've really got to afford here is the furnishings for whatever house or condo or apartment that you wind up leasing. And it can be a lot cleaner as long as you're open with the landlord and the landlord is comfortable with the situation. So let's roll into number 3, and that's syndications. Now, syndications, what that is essentially you are an investor. You have a certain amount of funds, and you want to apply those funds to usually it's going to be a large investment, meaning a pool of investors such as yourself pool money together to a large investment firm or a group of individuals that will oversee the funds, and they use those funds to purchase large apartment complexes or assisted living facilities, or just larger investments that you personally wouldn't be able to do yourself, but maybe you have $10,000, maybe you have $50,000, $5,000, whatever it may be. Syndications are going to be 98% passive, meaning you give them the funds and maybe 2, 3, 4, 5 years down the road, you get a certain return on that investment. Now, you've obviously got to do your due diligence and make sure that the investment that you're putting your funds towards is going to be a good investment, and that's some work on your behalf, but they should be doing all they can to try to persuade you to invest in their investment. Now, the downside here, and this is more of a personal downside, is I'm not in control, meaning that if I invest my funds into a syndication, my funds are locked there for 3 to 5 years. I can't really pull them out. I also can't determine if my investment's going to be higher or lower than it initially intended to be. Obviously, we don't know where the real estate market's going to be heading in the next 5 years. Also, if you rewind 5 years, no one would have probably guessed the real estate market is where it is today. So there are a lot of question marks as far as what type of return you may make when you invest in something that really doesn't have a quick turnaround. The quickest syndication that I have personally been a part of is roughly about 2.5 to 3 years, but most are going to be between 4 and 6. So you're not going to be seeing that money, or I guess the return on your investment, for quite some time. But the beauty here is passive, right? All of us want to generate passive income, but a lot of people such as doctors, dentists, lawyers, people that make a tremendous amount of money, but they don't have a lot of time to really, door knock and find sellers that are desperate to sell. They don't have a lot of time to, not necessarily jump into the Airbnb arbitrage. So instead, they find individuals such as myself or people that I know personally that have a ton of connections and invest in these large apartment complexes or just large investments in general. And they've got a lump sum that they're comfortable moving that into that syndication with, a return again in 3 to 5 years. Now, the fourth way that you can get into real estate investing, and technically you can get into real estate investing with no money down this direction, or you may need a pretty hefty pocket, and that's going to be flipping. Now, we've all seen this on HGTV, and we always see how successful these individuals are. And I can tell you, having been a realtor for the last 6 years, I help a lot of people that flip homes wind up selling the home at the end of the day. Now, if you've been following this channel, there have been some ups and downs as far as me personally flipping a couple houses that I've now turned into rental properties. And on top of that, I've also had some disaster stories from sellers that have wound up way in over their head when it comes to flipping a house because there's just a ton of unknown. Now, you may do as much research as you physically can on a particular property, but the truth is once you start opening walls and you truly see the bare bones of the house, you just truly don't know what you're going to be spending when it comes to flipping. But the good news here is if you do get a absolutely killer deal on a house that I essentially got back in 2021. I technically got the transaction in 2020. We closed in 2021, and I had a substantial amount of equity built into that property. Now, there's been some hiccups since, some pretty expensive hiccups, especially during the entire process of remodeling the house, and even now that I'm dealing with today, 2 years later, but I still have a substantial amount of equity because the purchase that I got in 2020 and wound up closing in 2021 was a huge spread. And then, of course, home values continued to rise over the last couple of years, so I'm sitting pretty nice with that particular flip. But on the flip side, there are plenty of sad stories, such as an individual seller that I helped sell a house. They actually had to bring about $50,000 of their own money to closing in order to get the house closed. Even though they had spent the last year remodeling this house, they didn't even get close to what they were hoping to sell it for. So if you're looking for an option to invest in real estate with, a high risk and high reward, I would say flipping is going to be your best bet. Like I said before, you technically can get into flipping homes without really putting any of your money down, such as using hard money loans or borrowing from a private money lender. At the end of the day, you still have to pay that money back, but technically it's not your own money that you're forking up for the house or maybe the remodel. But you could also wind up being in that situation with the unfortunate seller where they paid their hard money lender back and they still had to come to closing with plenty of their own cash. The other downside with flipping is I would suggest you have tremendous books, meaning that you're keeping track of all of your expenses and all of the income that you do potentially generate, because we're talking short-term capital gains when you're flipping homes. Meaning if you're buying something and selling it within a year, you're going to be taxed substantially higher than, let's say, you bought a rental property and sold it 20 years down the road. So make sure if you are getting pretty heavily into flipping homes, make sure that you've got a great CPA, or make sure that you know how to keep your books well defined. And last but not least, this is going to be my favorite by far when it comes to real estate investing. And it's what a lot of us know most as owning rental properties, and that's buy and hold. Now, essentially what you can do here is there's a bunch of different routes that you can go. You can buy a house and live in it, move out because you got a tremendous interest rate in 2019 or 2020, and then turn it immediately into a rental property before you move to the next property. You can just slap down 20% on a good deal, put a tenant in, and rent it out for the foreseeable future. You can even do what I've done a couple times and mix flipping with the intention of building some equity into the house, and then again putting a tenant in once the flip job is done. But really, when it comes to buy and hold, I would say it's the least risky out of any of the ways that you can truly invest in real estate. Let's use a veteran, for example, or maybe an individual that's utilizing their FHA loan and buying their house for the first time. You're going to be putting anywhere from 0 to 3, maybe 5% down on a home. You live in it, maybe you sacrifice a little bit and rent out the rooms, and eventually when you decide to move on, maybe move out of state or move to another house, you just put a roommate in the room that you vacate, or you move them all out and you rent to a family. Now, there are some risks when it comes to buy and holds. I have had to evict one tenant in the 6 years I've been a landlord. I also had another tenant that had stayed in the unit for about 3 or 4 years and wound up just absolutely trashing my entire unit. Spent about $30,000 to $40,000 getting that back into shape to be able to sell. But I don't think you're going to be able to make any money in life without a little bit of risk. And lastly, the beauty of buy and holds is you're having your tenants pay down your mortgage. You're essentially having your tenants make you money and build your net worth, because let's just use me as an example. I have about $5 million that I own when it comes to rental properties. Half of that is in equity, so I've got about $2.5 million in loans. My tenants continue to pay that down, and let's say in the next 20 to 30 years, all I do is pay down my debt. I pay down my mortgage by my tenants paying their rent. Well, in 20 years, I'm in my mid-50s, or maybe 30 years, I'm in my mid-60s, and then I'm able to off-sell these properties, and I'm sitting at about $5 million, assuming no appreciation over the next 5 or 10 years, or no inflation, which obviously both of those will occur. So I'm still going to be sitting north of $5 million in properties that I own, which based on my dad's retirement would be a very, very healthy retirement. So at the end of the day, you got to pick your poison. You got to decide whether or not you want to head in a direction that is a little bit more risky, but it's got a higher reward. You also have to look at, hey, do I have funds available or not? Because some of these options, such as syndications, you can't join a syndication without any funds to be able to invest in it. But on the other side, you certainly could wholesale without a single penny in your bank account. It really depends on your particular situation and where you want to head. If you guys have any questions about real estate investing, like I said before, I've been in the game for about 6 or 7 years. I would love to help and answer anything that you may have. And if you are interested in personally investing, feel free to reach out to me personally, and I'll do anything I can to get your ball rolling. Thanks again for watching, guys. Make sure to like and subscribe. It really does help. And stay tuned for the next video.